I heard that. All right, let's see who's here. Am I here? I'm here. Dr. Beeson's here. Dr. Bradley sent me an email, said he would not make it. Dr. Ellerby, anybody seen him? I have not. Dr. Jarvis is here. Dr. Malone, Dr. Manifold. Dr. Moore is not here, but I have gotten emails from Dr. Moore. So Dr. Moore seems to be doing well enough to send emails. So I have not talked to him in person. I don't know if anybody else has, but at least he's sending emails. Dr. Remick is here, Dr. Troutman is here, and Dr. Spear I have not seen. So I'll bring your attention to the agenda, which is short for this meeting. I apologize to everybody up front because I sent out an email asking for agenda items and realized that I'd already decided we were only going to have one. So I'm sure that hurts everyone's feelings. I'm going to reverse a little bit of the agenda, and first of all, we're going to talk about the vision and the mission, because we're supposed to do that for every committee to remind us why we're here. The vision of GETAC is a unified, comprehensive, and effective EMS trauma system for a health, safety Texas. And mission is to promote, develop, and maintain a comprehensive EMS trauma system that will meet the needs of all patients and that will raise the standards for community health care by implementing innovative techniques and systems for the delivery of emergency care for the entire population. So we'll keep that in mind as we deliberate. Jumping down to agenda item number 2 is Jory Klein here. I think this was her.
It'll be Joe Schmieder.
It'll be Joe Schmieder. Do we know Mr. Schmieder, Mr. Schmieder?
Not a problem.
Well, that's good because I was going to ask you about something else too, but go ahead.
Great. So we've put this agenda item on your screen on your agenda. And it's about, for the audience, it's about EMS patient care records provided to a receiving facility at the time of dropping off the patient. And we're hearing more and more issues with that in the office. I know it's a national issue. We also added it to the agenda to the EMS committee, and Dully was going to be reaching out to you, Dr. Greenberg, to put together a couple docs and a couple of their committee members and really look at this. And what we're concerned about is that the law says you have to give certain things when you drop a patient off. Vital signs, time of arrival, what happened, the history, the type of care you gave, and who the crew was. And it says that you should do it in a short, abbreviated writing or some mode to ensure that they're getting the information. And that's just not happening in a lot of cases. And being around for a while, I guess it comes with age. I can remember when I first started riding on a truck, you had plenty of time to talk to the docs and have a little chat with the nurses and that stuff, and those days are about over. And the PCR officially getting to the hospital 24 hours or one working day, which is what the law says, after the patient has been arriving, does no good for the immediate care for that patient, and the patient's either upstairs, home, or in the morgue. So it's really not benefiting the patient. So we'd like to bring that agenda item back up and get some conversation going and see how can we improve that. All your national organizations that you all belong to are having the same issue and the same discussion and saying, hey, we got to do this at time. It's a patient safety issue. So that's why we put it on the agenda. Dudley's willing to take the lead on putting together this little task force to take a look at that and make some recommendations on how we can improve it in Texas.
Okay. Any discussion? And that actually leads me to a question for Dr. Beeson, but go ahead.
So I think one of the big issues about that is a technological issue. When the law was written, the majority of these, if not all of them, were handwritten notes.
Sure.
And I know there are still some systems that use paper, but there's getting to be smaller and smaller. So one of the things we don't want to do is require folks who have switched over to an electronic system to now have to have some way to print it, turn it into a paper version, and leave it there. There are expenses involved and time issues. So we want to make sure that we don't go backwards from a technological standpoint.
And I fully agree. And I know some of the software companies are hearing this also, and they have a way that you can start putting some of this information in on a laptop or a computer in the truck, print out the short information, leave it behind, or transmit it to the hospital. When you go back to the station, all that information's already there for you to complete the patient care report and then send that over. So I think technology is moving forward on this, but it is just an issue that we kind of need to bring to the attention of the providers in the system.
So is anybody opposed to the concept of real-time delivery of a patient care report? They think either technologically or for some reason we should not support that in concept.
Yeah. So the issue is the definition of real time and the medical record. So I think it is unreasonable in high volume systems to, can you hear me?
I can.
Well,
I'm
I
not
know
sure.
you can.
Yeah.
I think it's probably unreasonable in high volume systems to expect a completed electronic medical record. So
Yeah.
we have pretty detailed standards for what has to be in our electronic medical record, and it takes people a long time to do that. Still well within 24 hours. I think that's incredibly reasonable, and we may need to make that more abbreviated. But I think we have to be very careful about saying what is required. If you're talking about the entire document, yeah, I think that's unreasonable.
No, I agree with that.
A short subset, if we need to define what that short subset is, I think that is probably reasonable.
I think
There is a short subset in the rule. I had to pull this up the other day for a nurse that was asking.
Yeah,
and
it's
you know
there.
why she was asking.
It's the patient's name, the condition, the care that was given, the status during the transport, the vital signs, the initial time, the initial dispatch, the arrival there, and the staff who left the patient behind. That's what's in the rules right now, and I abbreviate it. It's more words, obviously.
So Dr. Greenberg, right now, when we call a patient report, with the exception of the call time received and on scene and depart and arrive, with the exception of that, we are giving that information to a nurse on the phone who has a pen and paper. But I'm just saying.
Sure.
That when I look back at that document, I didn't see it said that you had to leave a written.
Yeah, there is language in there, but let me just say, I think what we're looking at from the department standpoint is that we want everyone to look and make sure there's some system in place. So when we leave the hospital, the nurses and the doctors have the information on the immediate stuff they need. So in your case, where they're calling in and they know that it's happening, then it's not an issue. And if there was an issue, we'd go back and say, okay, how did this fail?
Well, I found a situation in which this information was being given, it was being taken and written down on paper and recorded. Then we left a small slip of paper with essential data. None of that made it to the patient record.
Yeah.
So, this is a multifactorial.
I would just add that, I think all of us agree conceptually this is a great idea. We want to share the information. It is a technological piece to be able to share that, and the barriers that are out there are unfortunately somewhat complex to be able to get these multi-vendors and systems to be able to communicate. We all face that on a daily basis, and we just have to be careful that the EMS provider shouldn't be bearing the burden of the process. Because there are so many instances like this where information is provided. We have difficulties even getting electrocardiograms, as important as they are, on a paper copy into the chart. And there's a lot of folks on the hospital side who complain that they don't get it, but the information has been provided to them, and somewhere in the hospital side of things, that particularly the hard copy has gotten lost or is not immediately available for folks. And so I think as long as we keep that in mind and work towards those goals, the HIE pieces should be the common place to fix that, but they're a little behind the times even with being able to do that.
And as you inferred, this is a national problem, national organizations, and we're lucky enough now to have a state EMS medical advisor, representative, person.
Technically not that I know of. Joe, what is the status of that official?
So we have wrote up what I'm going to call the job description so that everyone knows, and it's under review at this time.
Okay.
So
It says Jeff Beeson at the top.
Wait.
there's no name.
It says the EMS position on GETAC, which is all of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is really a good example of where having a medical director at that table nationally,
Sure,
with those organizations would help us out. So, I mean, we passed this 2 GTACs ago.
last GTAC.
Was it last GTAC?
Yeah, it was
okay.
last one.
So, what can we do, or what do we need to do, or what needs to be done to?
So I can assure you that it is really being reviewed at the highest levels. I'm not hearing negatives.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll hear something pretty soon.
Because you want to go on some trips.
No, I mean, NISIMSO is in 2 weeks. pretty
In
quick.
October, first week of October.
October. So.
Okay. And we need to have
I mean,
somebody there?
there's
Somebody
meetings,
sent.
because I mean, there's things that,
There's
that
conference
we
calls.
should be involved in, work groups and task forces, and so the official position needs to be stated before I can request to be on those groups. So,
Well, I think
And
the,
that's why it just made sense to write out like a job description, so there's no confusion on who's doing what and saying what and all that kind of stuff.
okay.
So maybe I'll keep you informed, Dr. Greenberg, on
Okay.
where the progress is on what's happening with that.
So we don't need to take any action or,
I don't
Okay.
believe so.
okay. All right. And
I
then,
just wanted to clarify, did I understand that you were asking for us to do something on the issue of patient information being left at the hospital?
You don't have to take any action here, other than the EMS committee is going to be coming back to Dr. Greenberg and asking for a couple doctors, and they're going to look at the issue, and they're going to do it with the command and the medical and the EMS committee, and just look at the issue. And sometimes just looking at the issue brings attention to it, and we find solutions.
okay. Two things that may be in front of you. One is the DSHS approved medical director's course. We've talked about the course several times, the Quote Ohio course, I think is how we refer to it. It's now officially approved as a DSHS course for initial medical director education.
Good timing.
Thank you, thank you.
You
And
did that
then,
really well.
yes.
CE also for
And,
this.
yes, and you will get, is it 12 hours? No. How many, I
But I
forget how
mean,
many
for
hours.
those who have already met the initial training, it would count.
Right.
And obviously, it's more hours than needed for your continuing medical director education, but
Yeah. So this course, which is medicaldirectoronline.com, it's free until August of 2015. The state has paid that for us, so we should take advantage of that.
And it doesn't start until September 1st, so I know there is a doctor in this room that tried to log on, and they say, "What's your charge card number?" And it's $300.
Okay. All right.
And-
And that information will get disseminated how to all of the medical directors in the state?
We have been, obviously we've been passing it out here. We're going to be talking to the RACs tonight about it.
Okay.
And see what they can do to reach out into their communities there. And I should say that it is open to anyone who's interested in taking it. An EMS provider, an administrator for an organization, whatever, can take the course. 7 of the chapters are national kind of standards, and Chapter 8 is only on Texas EMS system rules and regulations. And there's questions built into it. There's a test you got to take to pass it. So yeah, and my guess is the normal person, maybe other than Jeff, no, the normal person, it's going to be about 2.5 hours to do all 8 chapters. I can't imagine it's going to be much longer than that.
I think if you're truly going to do it, it's going to take longer than that. I mean, if
Yeah.
you have some knowledge, you can go through it pretty quick.
That's true.
I'll tell you though, for working with Joe, putting the Texas chapter together, Joe did a phenomenal job.
I agree.
But reading it all really line for line and putting it into an education piece, I learned things that I was like, holy. Anyway, I said I was shocked, and I think for medical directors that are dealing with operators who are trying to tell medical directors what their responsibilities are and what they aren't, I think every administrator on record should probably take the course also. 'Cause it's truly,
Fully agree.
it's black and white what the medical director's responsibilities are.
And I really want to thank Dr. Greenberg and Dr. Beeson for assisting with this process. I mean, it was a real exchange back and forth, and I think we have a good product now. It's good.
Yeah, when he says exchange back and forth, Joe means that he did 99% of the work and we looked at it.
Yes.
So Joe really,
It
I mean,
worked. It worked.
we've talked about this a long time, but Joe did the lion's share of the work by far, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Also, there's a brochure that showed up here, which I guess I have to say a little conflict of interest since I work at Baylor, Scott and White. STEMI conference in Houston, October 16th and 17th. It's a statewide conference that Scott and White and the Texas Heart Institute, or I guess they're not part of it this year, Mission Lifeline and other chapters throughout the state have sponsored. It's going to be in Houston this year, if you see this brochure out. Next, I'm going to ask for any public comment before we jump into the review of the trauma system plan, which is the biggest and longest part of this meeting. I put all the other business aside. So is there any public comment? And I don't see Sam Vance. Okay, go on.
Todd Haugen with Border Rack. It's actually more of a question / request from some of the providers in our region. Have you as a committee thought about putting out either a position statement or a white paper or something on backboards?
Already
and
did.
use of or not? You already did?
We already did it. It should already be out there on the website.
Yeah, it's not there. I know it's been discussed, and I know many of you have already taken a stand on it.
I go into GETAC.
But I was looking for it because many of them do look to you as a committee to kind of guide their medical directors. And we're discussing it a lot at the RAC, and I told them I would ask.
My recollection is that we have done that, and I'm pretty sure it went through the council.
Yeah, I know that we did something here because Dr. Spear worked on it and it went
Right.
forward. I don't know that, I wasn't on the council.
I
and
think
saw
we
it.
essentially blessed the NAMSP.
We did.
ACS.
We did. Well, let us look and see, because I thought we had completed that. So
Well, I know it's been discussed, but I couldn't find it, and that's why I told them I would ask if there is something. If
we
can make sure
will, if it's not
dishes-
out there, we'll get it out there, because that is clearly our intent, to have an endorsement there of the NAMSP ACS backboard policy.
Thank you.
And I thought we had completed that. I know we've completed it through this committee. I thought it had gone through council, and it has to go through council before it can go out.
Yeah.
And
So-
I think all of us would offer, if local medical directors have any questions or concerns, that we'd be happy to discuss it with them directly or provide any support that they might need as they make those changes in their protocols and things.
Thank you very much. And then just the second part to the question, are any of you or have you as a group been discussing the use of TXA in the pre-hospital setting?
So we're using it on our air service and exploring it on a ground service with longer transport times. Around the country, a few organizations have looked at it. Our experience, I think we've had 4 administrations of it over the last month or two, and knock on wood, no untoward events. And so there's a lot of interest. It's still in a pre-hospital environment, still in its infancy of use and efficacy, but I'm certainly a supporter and would be happy to discuss further as needed.
The issue is it's not really a pre-hospital issue because initiating the bolus is not the problem, it's a continuation of the therapy. And so
Right.
the issues that we deal with are the receiving facilities. And so there has to be a true integration and a collaboration between your receiving trauma facilities if they're on board with it or not. Because if they're not, then it's not doing any benefit to the patients.
I think it's still benefit
Yeah.
the patient.
Thank you. And it's our trauma centers that kind of initiated the discussion, so we've been enjoying the lively discussions at our RAC. Just wanted your perspective. Thank you.
I know there are services out there that have it. I actually just saw an email today about a service that implements it, I think effective today. I didn't see you back there, Sam. I figured you'd want some.
Well, I apologize that I didn't get on the agenda. But,
I knocked everybody off, but it's public comment. So.
all right. So the National EMS reassessment, we finally got the national data back on that, and we'll be presenting a report that we'll hopefully have ready for you in February. And then the EMS recognition program that we've been working on that I told you about at the last couple meetings, we do have a draft proposal ready for that. Since I did not get on the agenda, I don't know if we can present that to you or not, as far as sending it to you in email form.
Yeah, probably not. Probably wait till the November
Till
meeting.
okay. And then Dr. Shaw also wanted to be on the agenda, and he kind of forgot about that also. So he just wanted me to update you on the NASIMSO model clinical EMS guidelines. That they should be coming out in October of this year. And the guidelines cover about 40 different clinical situations and provide guidelines for EMS medical directors to create protocols for their systems. The work group had representatives from several EMS stakeholder organizations from across the country, including several state EMS medical directors. The guidelines are mainly consensus-based, but in situations where there was an existing guideline created by the National Pre-Hospital Evidence-Based Guideline Model Process, which was endorsed by FICOMS and NIMSAC, the evidence-based guidelines that were produced for this document are airway management, allergic reactions, asthma, bronchiolitis, croup, pain management, seizure, shock, including the control of external hemorrhage and spinal care. And from a pediatric perspective, the American Academy of Pediatrics had 2 representatives on the work group for this project, which was Dr. Brian Moore, who's a pediatric emergency medicine physician and is also New Mexico's state EMS medical director, and then Dr. Shaw, who you all know is our program director for the EMS for Children State Partnership here in Texas. Additionally, there were also 5 pediatric emergency medicine physicians who helped review each of the guidelines to help integrate pediatric needs into the document, and one of those folks is Dr. Remick, who helped with that. Dr. Shaw also wanted to update you on his Pegasus project, who he is the principal investigator on. Pegasus is an acronym that stands for Pediatric Evidence-Based Guidelines Assessment of System-Wide Utilization in States. You can blame Dr. Shaw for that when he comes up with some acronyms. Anyway, so that guideline development committee used the FICOMS and NIMSAC endorsed pre-hospital evidence-based guideline model process, and they're in the process of creating the following 4 guidelines, which is airway management, allergic reactions, shock, and spinal care. Those Pegasus guidelines are going to be incorporated into the NASIMSO model EMS guidelines, and they've been created with a multidisciplinary committee of EMS medical directors, pediatric emergency medicine physicians, paramedics, and parent representatives from Texas and New England. The guidelines will be implemented in City of Houston Fire Department EMS in October of this year, and will be implemented in all 6 New England states in spring of 2015. Dr. Shaw will be presenting on these at the Texas EMS Conference on Monday, November 24th, and the guidelines are currently being written up and for anticipated publication nationwide in July of 2015. So,
All right.
are there any questions?
Lots of stuff.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to having you on the agenda in November.
All right.
And then the report in February.
Okay. Thank
All right.
you.
Anybody else for public comment before we delve into the trauma system plan?
Dr. Greenberg?
Yes, sir.
Just one thing. I've had the opportunity over the past couple weeks to work with ASPR, CDC, NHTSA, and Department of Homeland Security, and they're pretty close to have some guidelines for Ebola that everyone's all concerned about, and they should be out hopefully this week or early next week, geared for EMS, police, fire, and emergency services. So I've heard some people ask that question while I've been here the past couple days, yesterday and today, and I thought I would just mention it to you all so you know that it is coming out. And unless something changes, the recommendation will be an N95 for the crew.
Okay.
So it's coming.
All righty. Okay, so what's the top timer for? It's throwing me
That's
off.
the clock.
That's
It
the
is
real-
throwing you off because
That's the actual. That's like the actual time.
Yeah.
Ah, gotcha. I got the. Yeah, I got.
Hands.
Really? Yeah, what's the face of a clock mean anymore anyway? Okay, so we're going to jump into the strategic plan for Texas EMS and trauma system. I sent that out to everybody, hoping people would take a look at it. Quite frankly, not expecting a lot of us to, because I felt responsible for it. I went through it and made some edits using track changes, some of which, and especially for the audience, some of which I did to stimulate discussion before people throw rocks at me for some of the things that are in it. So what I'd like to do is, as we have an editor, is let's start scrolling through, and I don't know if everybody wants to get so we can all look at the same thing on the screen. Unfortunately, when you use track changes, it starts to change the pages, the page numbers. Really, I think the first bit of stuff, the introductory letter, all those kind of things, I didn't think we should spend time on it to start with. We can go back to. If you scroll on down till you start seeing something that looks like it was changed. And even before we do that, does anybody have something they really want to make sure we talk about before we get going? No? Okay. Start scrolling through, and if we go back up, I saw a blue line. All right. So one of the things I did do was I did a find and replace for everything that was Department of Health and changed it to TDH and changed it to DSHS, and the same thing for the medical board acronym. those little things, I don't think we should spend a lot of time on. So you'll see a lot of changes from that. So keep on going. And when we hit a page that somebody wants to talk about, please stop. Okay, so the first part, that is a box, and I think it's on page 3. Hold on. Oh, that's right. Yeah, which doesn't go along with the number of pages I have. So, but on page 10, if you have it in front of you, or printed at the bottom, page 10, there's a box about system plan components. Some of you know plan components much better than I do. So I don't know if this is taken directly from other documents, or if we can change it, or what anybody's thoughts was about that. And you can see what I changed. Instead of access to the system, I just put system access. My English teacher would be proud of me. Changed pre-hospital. I didn't know if H, regional medical control, actually belonged there or not. Any thoughts? Because that's really RACs and it's not medical control. Why is it so quiet in here?
Strike it.
I'm
No,
not
I
sure I
agree.
see a point for it.
Okay. Can you strike it, please?
Yes.
And then regional trauma treatment protocols. I didn't change the
See
word.
prior discussion.
Yeah. Well, they're actually
H.
H. Yes. Select H and just do a delete, and it'll put a red line through it. Or there you go. So regional trauma treatment protocols are actually out there. Every RAC has them, or if you want to put it down as RAC protocols. Yes, no. And again, what we're doing is we're making recommendations to the larger group, so.
I like RAC protocols because that's what they are.
Okay. Can you change that to, yeah, you can just type in RAC protocols would be fine. And strike through the regional trauma treatment protocols. Facility triage criteria is really part of that, but I didn't know if we should leave it in.
So we're really talking about level 1, level 2, that kind of thing, so.
That's really part of the RAC protocols, I think. Okay, so strike through J as well.
Should be like RAC protocols and destinations or destination criteria.
Those are, all the RACs I've seen, it kind of has it all in there together.
Sort of facility capability
Yeah, it's all in there.
list.
Are we good with it? Okay. I just changed inter-hospital transfers to inter-facility transfers, given the number of different facilities that there are out there nowadays. Any other, and then I put trauma acute care facilities. Trauma, I'm sorry, that was the trauma and acute care was what I meant to put. So we can open up discussion of, this is supposed to be a EMS and trauma plan. There's nothing in it really specifically about the other things we talk about a lot for STEMI, for stroke, for other acute medical conditions. How much do we want to recommend goes in there? Do we want it generically or specifically?
Oh, I think that all of your time-sensitive disease processes are pretty much, I shouldn't say all, many are fall within RAC protocols, RAC guidelines, STEMI, stroke, PED-specific things, and so I think that anything that we can do to be more general, even just trauma, but acute care facilities in general, not just specific trauma acute care facilities.
So, yeah, actually, can you put the word "and" in front of acute? That's what I meant to do, trauma and acute care facilities.
So I think having
or
read
is
this
that-
multiple times.
So that's really our focus then, because I was looking at more specifically from the trauma perspective, but we
Well,
want to.
I think that's even actually the bigger question.
Well, I think in reality, this is an EMS and trauma. And EMS deals with many disease processes, not just trauma. So,
I don't disagree, but
without-
that's, I guess that's the question is, what is the scope of our work and request to do here today, so.
well, obviously
That's actually,
changed since this was written.
yeah, because there is a section in here we'll get to about GTAC's mandate. And since this was reported in.
Trust me, I'm all for
Oh,
it.
I know.
I'm all for it, it's just.
But, yeah, no, but we do have to stay within scope. I absolutely agree. After 2002 is when we were mandated to have a stroke committee. So,
I also wonder if there should just be something about disaster, the EMTF, under, because that is a system plan component. At least referral to
so why
the
don't we,
EMTF stuff.
how would we put that? Put an N and put disaster.
Say emergency preparedness program.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Emergency preparedness. And again, this will go from our committee to the next committee, to the larger committee, and then to GETAC. So if we just need to get mostly our thoughts and ideas in there, unless we feel very strongly about some wording. Okay, let's scroll down to the next. Again, the pages come off a little bit once you start making changes. So most of what is in here are changes to the abbreviations. Does anybody have any suggestions as we scroll through on the history and then GETAC itself? And then if you stop it right there, Governor's EMS and Trauma Advisory Council. I actually threw in at the bottom, you can see GETAC solicits and welcomes stakeholder input on issues brought before it. The reason I put that is because later in the document and throughout the document, and it started to wear me out, and this is just me personally, it would say, every time it would say GETAC, it would say with stakeholder input or with stakeholder assistance. I personally think that's a given. And I thought that should be in the document. When we get to that point, I expect other people are going to want to take that out. I don't have a big dog in the fight. Mostly I wanted to have it out there for discussion. But
It is repetitive.
yeah, I think GETAC by nature and by mandate looks for stakeholder input for every decision we make. And that should be a given. But it actually didn't say that in here. Is everybody okay with?
I agree with the change.
Okay. Let's keep it scrolling. Then some of this will obviously get redone as we go through. That 25% is just highlighted because some of these, a lot of the statistical things will have to be redone. There we get to GTAC's mandate, and that's where I put question add stroke. I think in there we should refer to the mandate to have a stroke committee.
I don't think cardiac was mandated.
Yeah, there's no mandate to have cardiac. Stroke is actually the only committee we are legislatively mandated to have. So I believe that needs to be in there. Does anybody know of any other mandates that have changed since 2002? We have to use our collective memory on this.
I think that you're absolutely correct on the mandate piece from stroke, but the cardiac component is such an integral component to what we do that we could put in essentially something along the terminology that's a functional mandate or something along those lines.
Okay. So how about, you want another paragraph under that talks about even though we're mandated, we expand to?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
that's realistic. For
the mandate and what we do should be included in both. And the fact that if this document's going to last for another 10 to 12 years.
Add STEMI and other acute care conditions. Just, that'll be as a note.
You said acute?
Yeah, and other acute care conditions. Dr. Malone, you took a lot of notes. Are we hitting some of what you had?
That was basically a note that I wrote to
Okay.
myself based on what you had sent to us to look at the document.
Okay. Any other thoughts about? Okay. Let's scroll till we see something else fun. And a lot of, yeah, if you stop there, a lot of that part we just went through was about the process from before. Obviously, that will have to be rewritten based on this process. This was a statement that kind of caught my eye as I thought something that really should be talked about. And again, they're talking about what they did before, but it said there was development of consensus on the inclusion in the plan, saying there should be no voting in decisions regarding appropriate medical care. And I know that was 12 years ago, and there a lot of the deliberations that went on. I just think it's a interesting sentence to have in there, and didn't know how people felt about kind of saying we would never vote on a political issue. Very odd.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically to say that the voting process has no place in appropriate medical care. That's what it's saying, right?
From my understanding, that was in there to say that this committee is not going to be mandating clinical care. I'm not going to come out with a protocol how to manage a specific disease process. In a sense, this is a protection if we don't have a state. GETAC is not going to come out with a statewide.
No, I think the history was that this was a collaborative process, and that the voting process leaves somebody out on the other end, and whereas the goal was to work towards a consensus building component to it, and I think that was such an important piece that it was identified there for that. Again, I wasn't on the committee at that time. I don't know, but that's kind of my interpretation and presumptions. And then I guess how can you preserve that component, but without the voting piece? Because we have motions, we have votes all the time and things. So.
Yeah.
That was the way I remember it also, and I think that grew out of the prior TIMSAC and all the other acts leading up to this one. I think that there was a lot of voting involved, and it was pretty contentious from time to time. So I think that was absolutely the intent.
Yeah, I think the pendulum went from one extreme to the other, and hopefully we're back towards the middle now, where some things are by consensus, and sometimes you're the one guy voting for or against something. So, again, I'm not going to beat hard on this one, but would anybody be opposed to a suggestion to maybe remove it?
I think you could just remove everything within the parentheses.
Yeah. I think everything within this section is going to have to be redone anyway, because it's the process they went through before.
Dr. Troutman suggests we should take a
should
vote.
You want to vote? I don't think we can do that without a consensus. All right. Let's move on down. Again, those are discussion points that we'll have at a higher level. So again, that's only highlighted to somewhat for historical reference and to show that we're going to have to update it. It'll be interesting to see what the update is when we see how many providers and facilities and all we have, since it's 12 years ago. All right, go back up a little bit to where it says the future. I just threw in the wording, the ideal EMS trauma system of the future. Just reading through it, it looked like ideal to me. Again, small wording. In that box, though, I need input from the committee and actually from any of the audience. I think there are, within that box, organizations that no longer exist. So the ones I knew of that had changed their name or didn't exist, I took out. That wasn't very much. I didn't know why on the TMA they specifically put a committee. EPT hasn't existed for a long time. And then, again, we're back to TDH and DSHS. Are there organizations on there that no longer exist? I know there are a bunch more organizations. We'll look at that. But.
I think that Children's Hospitals is Children's Hospital Association of Texas. It's CHAT. And related institutions. I don't know.
So what is it again? Children's Hospital
Association of Texas.
Okay, and you think that's the same organization that changed?
I don't know what related institutions is.
Can you just put a new one? Put a new bullet and put what?
Children's Hospital Association of Texas.
There we go. In case they're separate, because I've never heard of this.
Chat is better than shred.
Yeah.
What about TAFIC? The Texas Association of Freestanding?
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, they're not up there. They would.
Because I know they've kind of been meddling or looking at EMS destination.
Yeah.
TDEM and DPS from a disaster component.
Okay. I tell you, for the ones that aren't on there, I'm more worried about taking the ones off of here that don't exist anymore. I'm afraid those are the ones that, if you know for sure an organization is up there and doesn't exist anymore, and then we're gonna have to compile a big list of additional organizations. But are there any other organizations up there that people know do not exist anymore?
Does anyone know if the EMS Educators Association is still around?
Jeff and them are trying to revive it.
Okay. All right.
The Texas Association of Trauma Regional Advisory Councils, it's not that anymore.
Okay. So if you, wherever that one is, if you would just mark through that.
First column, second bullet from the bottom.
There you go. All right. Anything else that's changed its name or doesn't exist? I think it's going to be easier to get people saying, hey, me too. I'm not on the list. I think it's going to be harder to make sure that things that don't exist anymore are taken off. Okay. All right. Let's go on forward. What section is this in again? I already forgot.
The future,
The future, yeah.
stakeholders' future.
Yeah, so this is under the future. And the sentence, EMS will remain the public's emergency medical safety net. I don't think we're a net anymore. I think we're absolutely essential. I think that also kind of conflicts a little bit with something in here that's near and dear to my heart, which is making EMS an essential public service. So I don't think we can just say we're the safety net anymore. We are it. And we are absolutely necessary. Does anybody disagree with that?
Well, I guess the question is, does it say that as opposed to eliminating that without making sure that it explicitly says that elsewhere?
It does.
Oh, it does.
It does say essential public service. Actually, it says essential service, and I threw in the word public. So I think we've talked about that for emergency medicine being the safety net. We're not the safety net anymore. We're not even at the bottom anymore. We're just essential. All right.
In terms of the goal areas.
Scroll back up.
It says evaluation. I'm just wondering if, I don't know if this is working. I'm just wondering if it should say performance improvement as opposed to just evaluation.
Okay.
Just as a.
You want just performance improvement or evaluation? You want to just we want us to throw performance improvement in there? And
I just think it's a more all-encompassing evaluation.
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily suggest an improvement process. It just suggests that you're evaluating. So.
okay.
Yep, we're still bad.
And then, yeah, put in performance improvement and strike out evaluation. And then we'll have to do that again later in the document. Remind me when we get to that point. All right. The vision and the mission are here. And then this is how we start to get into the big, to me, the most important part. We have 45 minutes, and we're going to get into the good stuff. So let's scroll down to integration. And that's a lot of background. Again, stop if anybody wants to talk about any of the parts in there that I haven't put something on. Please stop her. I think I just did some. I did some wordsmithing that you can look and see if you agree or disagree with. I'm happy to change it. My sense of brevity sometimes does not coincide with everybody else's. Dr. Jarvis is a bit more verbose than I am. Just saying.
For example, I would not have abbreviated whatever stands for your vocabulary.
Thank you. So that was number 2. I need help with that. I didn't understand that part. I mean, I understand it, but I don't understand it, why it has to be separate. And again, that's just my sense of brevity and trying to focus a document, and I may be doing that wrong instead of. So any suggestions on the objectives or the strategies here under integration? Gonna scroll up?
Scroll up or down?
Down, yeah. Oh, not that far.
I should drive this thing.
Who? Well, why don't you get up there and drive? It's hard to run the meeting and drive at the same time, so. Now I'm all good. Oh, no.
Now it's your responsibility.
No, it's, no.
That'll teach him to
And you
complain.
can steer.
It rolls downhill.
There's no roller.
If Starla gives it to me, it's going down to you.
There's no roller on this.
So where are we at? Oh, what's this? What's this button do? Oh, crap.
Oh, dude.
No, she did that. I didn't do that.
Take it away.
Yeah, here, take it. There you go. Do something with that.
Can you hit the escape button? Control Z undo. You can't control this.
Oh, it's not doing anything?
It ain't doing nothing. Okay.
All right. Any thoughts? What are my comments? I can't read my comments. Oh, yeah, this is where, again, so I don't get, I can get out of the room without getting beat up. I'm not against stakeholder input by any means. I think it's a given. It just, what's that?
You're against redundancy.
I'm against redundancy. It really, I mean, it wore me out reading through with every time you turn around it says stakeholder input. And I absolutely agree with it. It just beat me up in the document. So I certainly am not going to fall on my sword for it. It's a suggestion.
What about all these dates? Obviously, they're past and behind us. Do they just all need omitted, or?
Some of these, I didn't know if we had accomplished some of these, and I didn't know if some of these were even still priorities.
And I even wonder, should we even have dates in this type document?
I believe the thought process, which I agree with, is some things definitely need dates or they never get done.
Time frames at least.
Yeah, time frames. And there are a lot of time frames and dates in here. But I do agree that having a date for everything kind of sets you up for failure. All right. Any thoughts on this?
Well, I just want to comment on on line H here.
Yeah, you got to almost
I
eat the
thought
microphone.
everybody could hear me. Sorry, Dr. Greenberg. So I want to just comment on the essential service part of this, and I realize that those are big rule changes and big legislative changes, but I would really like to emphasize impressing upon everyone that although we are not called that and we're not labeled that, we are functioning as that. Absolutely. And we're not being funded as that. So that's all I'll say.
Okay. And I agree. Under GNH, I put a note out there. I don't know if these actually are roles for GETAC. And I'll defer that to the larger group. But I will be bringing that up when we go through it in the larger group about GETAC educating governing bodies. I think that might be with stakeholder assistance. That's where they were thinking about it, but I'm still not sure it's truly a GETAC job. D is.
So that's old. Develop processes for the rack.
Yeah, I think that. So is D complete? DSHS does have processes for the racks. So we can delete D. You think C's done?
Yeah, that's rack development stuff.
Okay. B?
C and D?
No, C and D. I was asking about B. I changed that to, I added the word continually. Same kind of thing you were thought. It said, work and develop these. I put the word in continually to keep it there because I think it's something we should do. All right. Any other thoughts on any of these?
So I don't know if you want to include this under strategies or there's somewhere else we should put it. But one of the things I think is important for us is the ability to essentially assimilate clinical data. And the bottom line to me would be participation in clinical registries such as CARES, cardiac arrest, STEMI, stroke, any of those sorts of things that would allow us to look at a statewide level, that clinical type of information. And so without putting us into specific registries, kind of finding the correct wording for
There's
that.
stuff in here about,
Yeah.
On page 25, information systems, if you want to look ahead to that and see if it
Yeah,
has.
so again, that's where I said I just didn't know if we wanted to put that in as a strategic point of view for us or not.
I mean, this is the integration tab. Do you think it belongs in there? Or do you feel strongly about it, or?
I don't feel strongly, I just,
Okay.
again,
You want it in the document for sure.
we've got it in
Actually-
the document, but the question becomes is, do we feel that's a strategy piece that we want for this or not? I think so.
under integration, the strategy is definitely health information exchange
Yeah.
with not as much registries as much as outcomes and other health information.
Absolutely.
It's certainly a huge piece of integration.
Definitely.
So can you go down and put a new bullet? So you'll have to scroll down. There we go. And then we'll remind me to go back and look at H, I, and J. Put a K. And Dr. Manifold, you're wonderful with the
Just
words.
health information exchange.
Assimilate clinical information for dissemination isn't the right word, but for on a statewide level or something.
Okay.
We can come up with something.
Put information statewide level,
Okay.
and we'll work on it from there. Okay, and then we actually already talked
I
about.
would, just as a reminder, lest we forget what that means, just put in there that we're talking about health information that we're talking about health information exchanges. Looking at that, in 5 minutes, I wouldn't be able to tell what we were talking about.
Okay. And that's the appropriate health information exchange, because I know you're working on that process. Health information exchange is okay. Then I and J, I thought I was done, but I don't know that for sure. And then J, Sam Vance.
I think it's just ongoing. I mean,
Right.
EMS for Children program has ongoing recommendations for state performance measures.
So, but the EMS for Children legislation, hasn't that passed?
Yeah.
That's done.
Yeah, I mean, the EMS for Children program is reauthorized every couple of years, so most recently just this year, so.
How about GTAC will,
Yeah, it was just reauthorized in the Senate just within the last couple of weeks, from what I understand.
so how often does it have to be reauthorized?
I believe it comes up every 5 years.
Is it?
I think so. Is it?
I was thinking it was every 2 to.
Is it every?
I don't.
It
I thought it
seems-
was in 2012 most.
It seems to come up frequently. It's always seems to be kind of on the bubble. But
Because this was before it was passed, I guess. So can we put, will support the ongoing funding of EMSC? No, you don't like that, sir?
Well,
You
I
groaned.
don't dislike it. I just think that there's EMSC, there's many different groups similar that we should support. And that goes back up to the comment
Yeah.
you had earlier for special populations. So just supporting EMSC, is that enough? I think we really want to support all the groups. And so how do you word that to be not specific for children?
And all special interest groups.
Yeah, there are some special interest groups that are contrary to,
You're right. I'm just.
Well,
Well,
we
this is
vote.
also federal funding.
Yeah.
So we're talking about federal funding. We're not
Yeah.
talking about just special interest groups.
Well, I don't mean them as special interest groups, but I mean specific population, clinical populations, like the C or whatever it was where you had the hunt. They listed, you got the seniors, the certain disability, there's lots of groups, populations.
okay.
that is true. There are lots of special interest groups, but the EMS for Children program is a part of the National Association of State EMS Officials, as far as that is concerned.
So I'm not putting anybody in defensive. I'm just trying to be.
I understand.
Yeah,
This thing's going to be read 10 years from now, and they're going to say, "Well, they were
Why then
only
not?
thinking about the kids. What about the?"
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
I'm just fighting for our right also.
I usually, by the way.
All right. Well, let's leave that in there, and I'll carry that message as well too, that we support this and we support others, but we don't want to say we're going to support everybody that shows up with their hand out. Okay, let's scroll on down into clinical care. I just did some wordsmithing again. If you don't like it, please tell me. And same thing you were talking about, I tried to take out some of the, for adult and pediatric patients, I think they're patients. I took out hospitals because I believe that nowadays there's more than just hospitals where care is being provided. There's freestanding ERs, there's urgent care centers. Just because you don't go to a hospital doesn't mean we're not worried about the care they're being provided. And then I threw in acute care again. And again, it sounds like the will of the committee is that we want to include acute care and not be exclusive of trauma only. So objectives and strategies, again, I think this is all just wording. There's several spots where I took adults and pediatrics out. I'm not trying to upset anybody, but it just seems redundant to me. Are y'all, does that offend the pediatric colleague? Okay. All right, let's keep going. We got 30 minutes and we're halfway through, except there's a whole lot of stuff at the back that we probably won't deal with. Yeah, okay, so do you see at the top of the page? Yeah, so DSHS, TDH BEM, implement the comprehensive clinical management program, CCMP. I'm afraid we have to take that out, so.
It's coming.
It'll be here next Tuesday.
Yeah. All right, so communication systems. I'm not sure what group, unless it's EMS, is really going to provide a whole lot on this, so I tried to do some a little changes in there. This was before, 90% of 911 calls came in on cell phones. Now it's the landlines are the far minority. So I tried to clean this up a little bit. We'll probably have to have some work done on that. Let's look at the strategies and objectives here.
So this is an area where I think we have a fair amount of opportunity, and from a medical director's perspective, if we keep it in the clinical realm, I think there's so many areas of our state that don't have the ability or capability for pre-arrival instructions and true EMS dispatching, that if there is some way to incorporate that component into this, I think would be helpful.
That is in there. If you look at the objectives, and then even if you go down to strategies, which is probably a more important part, I believe it talks about EMDs. And I didn't know about B, because I don't know if it exists.
Right, yeah.
DSHS will complete the EMD Resource Center pilot.
Yeah, that was done.
It's done? It's there?
Well, it was just done with Montgomery County and a couple others, pilot projects.
Yeah, it was kind of like
Done and gone.
it was like the Poison Center rollover for those who didn't have MD per arrival. There was a pilot that was done, but there was no funding for continuation.
Okay, so that has to be deleted. Are there resources in the state for EMD then?
No.
Okay, that's fine. So that's
Into yours, Dan Craig, number 2 in the objectives, I think that we could, we talk about dispatching protocol, but I agree we probably need to include pre-arrival instructions or something to that.
so. I thought A and B both were probably antiquated, if you will. Or either they just don't apply anymore. Just because as I read through A, it makes it sound like wireless communication is up and coming instead of the primary. C, I thought, is really
Getting the information off of them, although our iPhones do it very well, our dispatch centers don't.
Correct.
That's still an ongoing issue.
Correct. We just need to find my phone for all the dispatch centers.
Well, I mean, the
Yeah.
technology, we need to do something. I'm not the technical person, but I mean, as things progress and now communities are now taking text emergency
Correct.
requests and stuff. So there's something that strategies about future technologies incorporation into state responses.
Yeah, that's, some of the editing I did up above was taking out cell phone and just putting requests for,
Right.
or I don't remember exactly how I did it, because, yeah, texting, now we're talking about, text to 911, which is going to be very interesting. So, Dr. Manifold, does C catch what you want, or do you want to add more?
Well, I don't know that we've made a whole lot of progress since 2002 when this document was put in place, so whatever was there perhaps hasn't helped us. This would be my personal opinion.
There's a lot of things that are in this that are still applicable today that we have not
Yeah.
dealt with.
Okay, so,
I think as long as it gets the attention it deserves, it's fine. It's
Okay.
written in the document, and we can prioritize it as we go.
okay, I mean, do you feel like we need to add anything here? And does A need to stay? Is it still called the State Emergency Communication Commission? Is it still called that? It is? Okay. I've always just called it the 911 Commission. I know the official name.
Should there be anything about like a priority dispatch?
I think that is under,
Protocols up in the,
yeah. EMD is mentioned. I thought it was mentioned down here. The pre-arrival.
no, he's talking MPDS.
Right.
Some,
Priority dispatch.
I agree with you, Jared, but that's pretty controversial. There are people that are not fans of that.
Well, but
It's
it's,
a trade name.
yeah.
Well, not
Whatever
just
register.
MPDS EMD, but call prioritization, because there are those that believe that every call deserves a
You got to go lights and sirens to
full
everything.
cavalry response.
Well, guess what? Then they've just prioritized their calls.
Yes, they're all priority ones, correct. I think that's actually addressed under the call taking, interrogation, dispatching. Okay. Public access, I don't think I did much with. Thoughts?
The one thing, if we're looking at something we would like to address over the next, 10 years of the lifespan of the document, is something that acts essentially as a combination, combining communications and public access, and that is informing people who want to help where the resources are. In other words, AED registries, and notifying local bystanders who have agreed to help that there's a call nearby. There are a lot of apps now that are available to do that, but they require being tied in with the emergency communication system.
And money.
And, yeah,
Right.
they're all proprietary, of course.
And would you include like reverse 911 capabilities in that?
Technologies like the pulse point and stuff, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
He's talking reverse. Back to what Jared said. Jared, you're on a good point, because if we're the medical director standpoint and the clinical experts in this,
Yeah, to me, we should be
putting
saying,
something there saying that
Stop
not
doing
all
it.
emergency calls are emergencies, and we're killing people running lights and sirens,
Right.
and we need to rethink that. I
I
agree.
mean, it's controversial but is it real controversial right here? If it's not, then we should stay.
No, and we should stand a point, because there is evidence to support the standpoint that not all emergencies are emergencies. And
D, put a D.
Particularly because the people we're killing in large part are ourselves.
No, you're right.
Yes, no, that's
Call prioritization. Medical, no, that's a
medical,
trademark.
it's priority dispatches.
That is a trademark thing, but.
I
yeah.
think only if you say, priority dispatch.
We can fill in the blank.
Yeah, we can fill in the blank from there. Now, and, well, actually, can you put an E as well, since there are no state resources for EMD?
There's been no state resources for
Put that there should be creation of state resources for for EMD. And again, I'll fill in the verbiage for the committee. All right, we hadn't even gotten down to medical direction yet. Public access. There's not much under the objectives of the strategy. So I think as we go through the document, and I'll have to defer a little bit to Joe. Hi.
They wake me up.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right.
As we go through this process, do you know who's, and I know Dr. Eastridge and I are basically going to end up with the document, but this goes to DSHS, kind of through DSHS. Will y'all be able to give us the input for a lot of these programs and for like public access, those kind of things? I'm assuming y'all will provide that input.
Sure. That wasn't even close to being convincing, was it? No, I'm sure we'll have some input, but this document is a GETAC document back to us.
Back to you.
Telling us.
Okay.
This is your recommendation on where the system needs to go.
Okay.
And we can give you updates as we've been doing through the meeting with Brett's comments and stuff like that, but all in all, it's your recommendation back to us.
Okay. All right. Public education. And I don't think I don't know, did the education committee look at public education or just education?
Just education.
Just education? Okay.
Yeah, workforce education, not
Okay.
public.
All right. I don't think I put anything in here. Any thoughts on public education or public access? Prevention or against disease and injury. I think that's all we need to say.
Well, don't get rid of it.
There's still stupidity. We're good. Oh, wait. This is on the internet, isn't it? Crap.
Bad connection. Bad connection.
Bad connection, yeah. For human resources, it talked about physicians, and I just threw in administrative burdens because really what drives us nuts is all the administrative hassles. And again, I think that we'll do more work on this. Anything from this committee, though. Again, remember, we're going to make our input from this committee, but then the larger group we'll go back through this and make some changes. All right, and then a lot more about the process there on human resources. That was from before. We'll have something to put in there from now. Just DSHS. Any thoughts on strategies for workforce? There's a bunch of stuff in there. We need them. Take out. I never thought I could get this committee in this room this quiet for this long. I get credit for that. Do I get credit for that?
It's just an
Well, you should be
anomaly.
We
chairman
just
again
had
next
lunch.
year.
Oh, that hurts.
So there are some workforce issues, and I don't know whether we need to comment on it or not, but, you know, again, the development of the profession, the shortage of paramedics, and how do we look to address that? And I'll be honest with you, it's probably pretty complex to be able to.
Oh, yeah. I know. I think it's
discuss
very
here,
complex.
But it's hard. How do we just let it go?
No, it's something because
Yeah.
we obviously see it in the urban areas,
Right.
but I mean we're seeing the rural volunteers who really don't have the voice. They're having huge issues with workforce, and then you're right, it's not mentioned. I mean, there's a little bit mentioned here about recruitment and stuff like that, immunity for volunteers, but I think it's an issue that is worsened over the last decade, and I can only imagine what it's going to be through the next decade.
Right.
Any new strategies or anything in here that really does not belong, aside from the dates, obviously? Dr. Malone, you're writing so much down, but you're not sharing.
I looked at G, and that was something that just jumped out at me at this moment, thinking about having critical incident stress debriefing resources around, and we didn't call it that here, but that's what it is. And these episodes occur in every service everywhere, and we don't always have that availability. So I'm glad that's there, and if we can make that comment even more important with the language of several of you, Dr. Manifold, we can make that more essential.
You're the silver pen devil. That's why everybody talks about you.
Shh, we're on the internet.
Oh, I forgot. So, medical oversight. Dr. Jarvis, you're looking so attentive. Did you have something on your mind?
We should have some medical oversight.
We should have some medical oversight. Is that a motion? We'll ask for a second. Okay, so let's look at.
Vote on it.
Well, the first word has him thrown off. It's the strong thing he's worried about.
All right. Let's look at, can you scroll on down through for medical oversight? For the Texas Medical Board, I threw in providing appropriate supervision. That is really the key to the Texas Medical Board when they look at physician delegation. Delegation is little letters, supervision is big letters. So I threw that in. I put specific reference to Medical Board Rule 197, and what did I take out? Oh, yeah. I didn't know if we wanted to shish kebab ourselves by that sentence that I struck out. Currently physicians affiliated. I just didn't think we wanted a doctor bash, because the next sentence does it fairly well anyway.
Well, although I'm not sure, the unfortunate seems to be referring to the previous sentence, and without the previous sentence, you're sort of wondering what's unfortunate.
Well, I think it gives us the opportunity to integrate some of the issues regarding board certification in EMS and EMS fellowship training programs that we could put, that we support those processes, again, as our workforce develops too.
Well, that's now TMB rule, though.
Yes.
TMB rule is you have to be board certified or take appropriate courses.
But the appropriate courses certainly don't equal, I mean, in the rule.
No,
it
no,
does,
not,
but-
yeah, by no means.
I don't know, it seems to me that that sentence is applicable today as it was 10 years ago.
You want it back? Can you reject that change? Highlight that sentence, and then yeah. Then reject, okay. We'll call that the Jarvis statement. Ready to go down to objectives? So, number one really is rule now, but it certainly is a nice statement to have. I don't know if we want to revise it, discard it, or leave it as is.
Should require change to request? Because the require is already done, but they're still coming to us for appropriate input on what curriculum and or it's just for, maybe I'm reading this wrong. No,
So,
it's not, I'm not.
yeah. I mean, it's now rule. It's now Texas Medical Board rule
Yes.
that you have, at least on the book, appropriate training and ongoing education. It's not truly credentialing.
So, Jeff, are you suggesting that instead of require, because that's already accomplished, that we assist people with achieving that?
That and I mean, the TMB has come to Dishes, who's come to us on recommendations on what that CE, the training programs and other things. So that's why, how do we reword this to request or guide, have influence on
Do you like
Suggest.
assist with?
Suggest?
assist or say anything?
Recommend?
Recommend?
That's, yeah.
Can you take require and change it to recommend? Since
So
it's
you're
already,
saying
it's already
it's
required
already-
anyway. It's required, but we can recommend the right way to do it. GETAC does not really directly provide education. Can you strike out number 2? Is anybody opposed to that, by the way? All right.
I think one missing objective here, at least from this standpoint, is some type of support, resource, something for medical directors within the state.
Yes.
So GTAC should be a resource of support or something for medical directors throughout the state.
Although, isn't that what you're trying to say in number 1, too?
Well, no, I mean, that's,
This is
as
more-
far as education credentialing, I think that,
This is a phone call discussion
right.
versus number 1.
I mean, we have the resources online that with you know, people can go to, and people requesting statements or things about
Right.
backboards and whatever. So
Well, yeah, we are doing it, but I think it should continue to be an objective. We do we are all listed as contact for other EMS medical directors in the state. We
Sure,
did
but-
that a couple of years ago, so,
as we're looking for the plan, GTAC should be that.
yep. So GTAC shall provide resources for EMS medical directors.
Yes.
And we can just leave it at that.
We
And
can
then
clean it up,
the
yeah.
strategy then would be the contact and everything
Right.
else. Okay, so I got delete happy on the strategies. Well, that's, actually, I kind of felt good about it, because I think we've
What
done
you need
all.
is a great big digital check mark.
Right, right. So,
C.
except under, we do have a peer review process within the Texas Medical Board. We don't have, that I know of, a process within the Texas Medical Board to facilitate resolution of conflict between medical directors and providers. I'm not sure that is a role for the medical board either. I think that is more a role for the RACs. Okay, let's go back to objectives. You want another objective?
Yeah, and I don't know if this is a proper place, but currently, audits, or I don't even know you call them audits, inquiries from dishes for a provider. There's no real medical director involvement in dishes review of that. So maybe an objective that we should support, GTAC should support dishes in developing some medical board review, or obviously it's not medical board, but
Medical director.
medical director clinical review of, to support
Absolutely.
them, because that doesn't exist today.
So, support medical director
Involvement.
involvement in dishes review of EMS providers.
Of complaints or what, I don't know how it's termed, but that doesn't exist today.
So you're not
At least
talking
not
about
formally.
initial licensure, you're talking about
no.
complaint resolution.
Right, complaint resolution
investigation.
or whatever.
Against,
development either
against a paramedic or an EMT
Or a
or,
provider for
Or a
anything for that
or
matter.
or an ambulance service, okay.
Joe and Jane, does that give you enough flexibility for
Support
that?
medical director's
with that
involvement.
statement to not paint any,
Or
paint
does
you
that
into any
rub you?
corners?
I would just say for the time being, you just put it in there, and if there's a
Okay.
problem with, we'll pull it out later or make a recommendation. It's my drift, or my understanding, what you're saying here is that this committee would be a resource to us if we had it, if we're doing an investigation or a complaint, or if we need support from from the doctors on an issue, this committee would be a resource to us.
So put of complaints against DSHS certified providers. That actually catches the personnel and the ambulance service. I can wordsmith that a little bit. We still don't have strategies here.
Great.
So do we want to include mobile integrated health in this component of objective and strategy discussion?
Say that again?
Do we want to include mobile integrated health in this component?
I think that is the only place it would go. Unless it went under public access. So how do you want to?
We want to
Just supporting the development of
Support the development of-
non-traditional roles of,
There you go. I love that non-traditional roles. Provide support and development and medical oversight of mobile integrated health, or of non-traditional roles of pre-hospital providers.
So should that go under public access though?
I think it should be here under medical
Okay.
oversight.
Put in a new one. And Dr. Manifold is going to say it again.
Darn it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there was too many commas in there.
Support and develop
Specialty.
medical oversight of non-traditional roles of pre-hospital providers. Feel that should be enough to get us started. Thanks.
You can build the strategies later.
Okay.
Objectives. Education.
Okay, so any strategies you want to put in there? Y'all want me to make that up,
You can
right?
make them later.
Yeah,
Give me
thanks.
objectives.
I appreciate that. All right, what's next? We have 9 minutes left.
Education.
I was in the room can you scroll on down? I was in the room for a fair amount of the education committee's discussion of this, and we have a fine representative in Dr. Ratcliffe on that committee, who I think is sort of listening.
Well, he is now.
Yeah, so I think what I heard from the education committee, I agreed with. And I don't know that we need to do anything more besides support them, if that's okay with this committee. I think I did make some changes in here, but I'm not sure. But I came in the room when the education committee was talking, and I thought what they said was fine.
Just regarding that, they mentioned a number of courses. Emergency pediatric care isn't listed with that. There's PEP, but not EPC.
Do we want to?
I don't know if they all want to be listed or if we just want to suggest that courses exist.
Yeah, my personal preference is just suggest courses, accepted courses, rather than putting a stamp on specific courses. All right, 7 minutes. Let's go. Research. We probably have the biggest chunk of this. Can you go on down to the objectives?
They're still applicable today.
Yeah, I actually, when I looked through this, I thought they were reasonable. I didn't know we needed a big change.
Okay.
Does somebody else feel differently?
Nope, they're still applicable today.
Are you just saying that because we only have 7 minutes left?
No, I mean,
Okay.
they're still applicable today.
Do we want to put something in to seek additional funding streams or mechanisms for research? It's kind of taken for granted, so I don't.
Well, I think it's promote participation in multi-center high quality. You're right. I mean, funding obviously is assumed in that, but for dishes for the state to find funding to support EMS research, that's a good objective.
I think that'd be actually in the strategy maybe of
Sure.
the strategy of obtaining additional funding for research.
Okay.
Funding for EMS research, good.
The
Got
one
that.
thing I would suggest, I was trying to go through and remember if this was in there already, but I don't think it is, that we will support the dissemination of research, essentially through, for example, the abstract presentations at the conference.
With the objectives, I would consider just emphasizing that we want to look at special populations too, and I might just add including or with attention to special populations, just so that there's a broader look, whether that be, looking at STEMI or geriatrics or pediatrics or whatever that might be.
Special population.
And pediatrics.
Yeah, be brave. Just say it. It's
I
okay.
did. I said
She did. It was nice. She didn't overstate it, but she stated it. Funding.
Geriatrics are just really wrinkled kids.
It's a bell curve. Okay. All right, information systems. I'll add something in there.
Put if you would, just for E, the dissemination of research.
I've got it.
Should we be using the words here of evidence-based research? I mean, it seems to be everything I keep hearing nationally. Or is that
Opposed to
Semantics.
non-evidence-based research?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know that we have any evidence on if
I guess
research
that would
is,
be consensus.
Yeah.
effective.
It's
So
evidence-based guidelines, but I don't know about.
we need to do research to see if research is evidence-based. All right, information systems. We have 5 minutes, and we started late. That's why people are staring at us from the back of the room, by the way. Information systems, there's actually quite a bit in here. I think we're going to have to, especially with the state of our current trauma database, state database, it's going to have to be significantly changed. I think that's actually beyond the scope of our committee right now. I think that has to be revised and then brought back. Dr. Beeson, you're sitting on that. Would you agree with that?
No, I mean, it's stuff's going in and coming out now, but yes,
Yeah.
there's still room to grow.
All right.
Do we need to put anything about participation in NIMSIS, or is that,
Well,
I think the revisions will cover that?
Revision should-
I think the revision is
Okay.
going to cover that.
Okay.
I think one of the things that would be useful is to promote participation in disease-specific registries, so CARES jumps to mind.
Okay.
And as well, have another discussion item, just supporting health information exchanges.
The nice thing about CARES with the new NIMSIS 3, that those fields are in there and you can statewide report. That's how states are currently reporting to CARES through NIMSIS data. So.
And the EMS committee also addressed that by saying that we should be working toward one data set that dumps into everything so that you're not reporting the same case in multiple databases.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So we only have 3 minutes left. We have left evaluation, legislation, regulation, and system finance.
Good luck.
That's a minute each. There's a lot in there. There's a lot we don't have as big a dog a fight as the EMS probably does and others. Anything in there specifically that you want to make sure is or is not included in those in our recommendation?
Oh, then I think the evaluation piece is important to us. That goes back to data and availability of data, communication between operations and medical.
Okay. And can I get the will of the committee to give me some the flexibility to make some changes based on our discussions?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Second. And just the evaluation piece, we were going to change to performance improvement.
Oh,
in that section.
yes. Can you change evaluation to performance improvement? Thank you. See?
Sorry.
Yeah, I told you to do that. Yeah. All right. Any other final comments as we run out of time?
We have 2 minutes left.
Yeah, 2 minutes left. But Jory wants the table.
Yes, she does.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you. I know this was a very cumbersome process, but I think it's the only way we were going to go through this document, just because of time. So thank you to the committee, and we will consider ourselves adjourned. Please push save on that. If you don't, I will cry like a baby.